This presentation was recorded at MVCConf. For more content like this, go to www.mvcconf.com. JetBrains, the leading vendor of professional development tools, now offers a range of new products for .NET developers. In addition to ReSharper, the top-class productivity extension for Visual Studio, you can now use .cover to run coverage analysis for your applications, .trace to find performance bottlenecks, and use TeamCity and UTrack for a perfect combination of continuous integration and issue tracking software. Go to www.jetbrains.com for more information.
So this presentation is on growl for MVC. This is a new framework that is coming out, actually in the process of launching today. My name is Steve Aber. I'm a software developer now for about 19 years, and this presentation is for growl for MVC. It's another open source project. I've been doing open source projects over the years, various ones. Most recently, contributing to MVC Contrib with the derived type model binder, and then also released the validation attribute test harness earlier this year. So this is another one that was fun. When I saw that Eric had mentioned the MVCConf and the idea of releasing software, I thought, how can I play a part of this? And looked around at some software that have done in the past, and the ideas of actually taking it and making something that could be packaged so people could easily bring it into their application. And so that's what we'll be focusing on today. So let's jump right into that. So what's in store today? What we're going to be looking at is first what growling is, and in particular what growl for MVC is, where you can find it, all that good stuff. Then we will wire up our project for growling and show the plugin capabilities to show that you don't actually have to include any web assets into your project. It's all going to be pulled in by the magic of areas and MVC Contrib's portable areas and all of that stuff coming together. So we'll then take a look at, discuss some of the design decisions, caching and packaging. There were some moments in this project where had some preconceived notions, those went out the window, made some correction, and just learning some things by digging into the MVC source code, and that I wasn't aware of before. So just share some tidbits there and talk about the design, and then we'll customize a growl for MVC for the implementation. So we'll actually take one and make it operate a little different and show how we can exactly how we can do that. And then finally, we'll be doing this within the sample MVC application, and so we will be growling from within our controller. And so for the first 2/3 of the code bits, the last part I want to atone for those sins and actually move those into a view model and get all of the UI stuff out of our controller and talk about how that stuff will come together. So what is growling? It became familiar on the Mac. They're just quick transient messages showing up on the system about the system's activity. I like to call it a spit and polish feature. It's something you would add to your app, not necessarily something that's critical in terms of the behavior, but a nice to have. There have been several jQuery plugins that have shown up to do these on the web. Quite a few of them, and they vary in their implementations. And so the two that we are using today are going to be BlockUI and JGrowl. I've included the links here, and this is part of the presentation that's being uploaded. So if we look at BlockUI, what we're seeing is growling, and I can see that I get a notification, have a nice day, and it goes away after a brief period of time. That's the BlockUI implementation, so pretty straightforward. And then there is the second one that we will be looking at is called JGrowl, and that's yet another jQuery plugin. When we look at that, it's just a slightly different format. These also respond to the jQuery theming, so you'll see I've got one that comes up and it goes away. He actually has a couple of nice features that if I do multiple, I get a close all along with the boxes going away. And if I hover over them, the contents actually stay. Different options with them. You can actually have them stay up. You can have them do a callback before they go away. All that good stuff. But we're keeping the functionality pretty simple and functional for our purposes today, and we'll keep focusing on that. Before we jump into looking at code and getting wired up and show how this is put together, I just want to point out the growl toolkit for MVC is out on Codeplex, growl for MVC. .codeplex.com. I'll be publishing this. I keep itching to push this button, but I need to get the license requirements for jgrowl and block UI up here, since we are including that in the package. They are not copyleft in terms of their license requirements. So, and I've talked to the creators of those. So, this is really good stuff. The source code is in Mercurial, and I even have the source code for what we're doing today. I've saved various save points, so just in case I get in a situation, we can always get out of it. So, with that, I just want to jump back to the presentation here, and then so growling, as we mentioned, it's going to pop a message up, and where we see it work for MVC is when you have an application where you have a central screen that you commonly come back to, maybe a hub or a dashboard, of the metaphors that have been used all too often, I suppose. But if I'm from a central location, if you think of this as a web page that has links that bounce you out to a web page and then back, I might want to say, something has changed. One example that we'll look at today is login. I want to look and say, hey, the user has logged in, or they've logged out, or there's something that's going on with that user that we want to show on the screen. So one last note before we jump into the code. In addition to those jQuery plugins that we are referencing, we're also using MVC contrib, as I mentioned earlier. We are using jQuery, of course, for the core AJAX and JSON calls, AJAX-JSON calls within the framework, so we can bounce back to it. We're making use of MVC areas as well, and we'll jump into that. And we also are using IOC engines. We'll be focusing on AutoFact today. We also have support built in, or examples built in, for Ninject. The samples are really quite simple. Debated back and forth whether to even include code samples as opposed to just a snippet, but went with this for now. Right now it's built on .NET 4, and it's not built for .NET 3.5. However, there's nothing preventing it from, we aren't using any language features that are specific to .NET 4. So if we jump into the code, what we'll do is take a look at how to set this up. So I'm going to exit out of here, and we'll jump right into the application. So this is the source code for growl for MVC that's going to be made completely public for right after this program later today. What we're getting here is basically a sample application that we'll be doing some work on. We've got the unit test application. We have a set of libraries, and this is the core of what we're looking at. There are two real core pieces that you want. Of course, library.core, lo and behold, that has the root level functionality. It doesn't actually have any growl capability. It knows how to communicate with a growl component, but it doesn't have any functionality, and that's where the add-on comes in. And so what we do from an add-on standpoint is we can reference one of these. And in this case, if I pull block UI into my application as a reference, it's going to register itself on startup. And it's not only going to register itself on startup, it'll wire itself all up and then get running right from there. If I include both in my project at the same time, I honestly don't know what will happen. I haven't tried it. I should have. I imagine there's some logic that would say one of these is going to go first, but somewhere, but I just don't know. So just include one, but it shouldn't be a problem if you include two, actually. So, and then we have our sample web app, and if we run this app, what we're going to find is, of course, the standard ASP.NET MVC sample app. And so right now, if I log on, I should have my user, Joe. Yes. Okay, welcome, Joe. And that's what we did. We're going to add some growling to this capability and show how we can pull it right into the application. And as I promised, we're going to focus on getting the growling going without having to pull any content, CSS, JS, or otherwise, into our application. So from a reference standpoint, what I had mentioned before was that we have the growl for MVC, we have core and block UI we're starting with, also including this one for AutoFac, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. This is really very lightweight, and you could get by without it very easily. So where we're going to drop to right away is if we look at our ASAX, we start on application start, and we're going to wire this up and get this wired into IOC. It's critical that this works with IOC because we're really separating our concerns completely. We don't want to have the controller looking at how to run these pieces. It shouldn't have to know how. And then we'll make sure that we can spawn these out into their view models, but ultimately even the view takes care of itself. So let's see. Let's jump in here. I need to. There we go. My screen is a little bit smaller right now, so I was actually losing my my debug window. I wasn't seeing that I was in debug mode. My apologies. So let's jump in. The first thing we're going to do is use the register all area as part of MVC. And what this is going to do is this is going to reach out to our other libraries. This is a great feature in MVC if you haven't used it already. But we can build our things in our other applications. There is in other libraries. I'm sorry. Let's see. So inside of here, I actually have controllers and views. It looks very much like a standard MVC application. Now, inside of here with the growl area registration, this is where I'm actually setting up my routes. I'm using register area embedded sources. If you're familiar with MVC contrib, you'll notice this. And then finally, input builder.bootstrap. This is a piece to MVC contrib that helps to wire up the view engine that's responsible for being able to render embedded content. And then when I have one of these included, or all of them included, as we talked about before, if I go into the jQuery growl, there's a implementation. This is registering the area. It's doing some maps. It's actually going into the growl add-on and saying, give me the growl add-on config, and we'll come back to that in just a minute once we get this running. We register our area embedded sources here, and we actually tell growl config that we want to register ourselves within, register ourselves as an assembly, and this comes in handy for wiring up our controllers within IOC. So it gives us one place, and we'll jump right back into that. So we've got our area registration. Our next thing that we're going to do is actually build out our assembly list, and we're going to grab the growl config. As you noticed before, it was registering it with one central location. Now we're going to grab that and just pull it into our list so that we can work with it. Now you'll notice there's some other things going on here regarding AutoFac. So we're registering our controllers already. There's some things going on that's been done before. So we're just pulling this into an existing implementation. So then we're going to say assembly list and we're going to grab our calling assembly. We make sure that we get ourselves in there. And then we've got our builder, and then we're just going to register our controllers, and we're just going to switch over here and say assembly list to array. This is a little shortcutty right now, but it gives us the point of what's going on. Finally, in our builder within AutoFac, as we mentioned before, once I have the builder, I want to reach out and make sure that everything, there's some additional things that I need to register for growl for MVC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I am going to register a module. So this is AutoFact speak for all registration module, and we're going to hand it the context.cache. Real quick, this pretty much summarizes this whole modification process right here. We're done with that. If we take a look at what's going on inside of here, I'll show you why I said this is really a small case of things that we actually have to do. We are registering for particular instances. One is iScoped cache. We'll talk about caching in a little bit. The purpose for this iScoped cache being drawn out is that it actually gives us an implementation point where we could, this is using the system.web cache, we could switch this to something like a memcache / velocity type of implementation here. And you'll notice that what's really critical here is the lifetime scoping. What this is typically request scoping depending on other containers. There's a growl recorder, a growl renderer, and then a session wrapper using iSession. So just a simplification there for test purposes that I use. That's very specific to how I'm using session. So what we've got here is the ability now to, if we take a look at Ninjex, for example, that's basically the same thing, just in Ninjex way of doing things. So exactly the same implementation in request scope as their language, their verbiage. If we look at this method here was, when I originally started working, I've actually saved this method. I found out that Ninject out of the box wouldn't do a function injection, func injection as I like to call it. And without function injection, what I was originally running into was a little different way that I was doing things. I ended up backing it out so I wouldn't be specific to any particular containers. But one of my colleagues, Jordan Terrell, I mentioned it to him after I had done some Googling, and about 12 minutes later came back and said, hey, here's the line, now you can do it. It works great. So a little piece of Ninja goodness for everybody there. So we've got the application wired up. We've got it wired up now in IOC. We'll do a quick compile, make sure we've succeeded. We have. Now let's jump into the website. Now, what I'm going to do, you may or may not want to do this. It actually is somewhat it has some reasons to say, hey, this is kind of cool. On the other hand, it's plenty of reasons to say, no, we wouldn't want this at a global level. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to access a couple of methods that are exposed by growl for MVC. The first is render CSS link, and the second is, of all things, render JS link. And technically, this can actually be multiple links. In the case of JavaScript, it is. Or it could actually be entire content being dropped in. I tend to avoid that so we can get caching capability out of the browser. Finally, I'm going to add for the rendering story, after our placeholder for content that goes into the page, I'm going to say html.render growl. And that's it. We are done for the moment at WireUp. Like I said, this may be something that you want to push more local to pages, or have some type of, if you have a class of these kind of views or that need to have growl capability, put that more local, but more on that in a minute. These, incidentally, if there is nothing to growl, you will get nothing on the page. Which makes this work fairly nice. You don't have links. You don't have links to the CSS and JS if you don't need them. So let's see. Our next step is to modify the account controller, and this is the last piece to get this all wired up. So if we drop back into our controller and say, I've marked this so we can just uncomment the code, so you don't have to watch me type. I've got a. Oops, that needs to be private. I'm going to inject into here a growl recorder so that I can at any time do some writing with the growls. Now, so I would say when I log on, I'm going to want to come back in here and add a message that says, hello so-and-so, welcome back, and we pass in the username. Further down, if we logged off, we could do the exact same thing. And then, let's see, if we go into the registering user, or if a new user is registered, we might want to say it there. And I think you get the idea. That's just peppering it throughout. Again, we eventually want to move this to the view model so that our controller doesn't have to be wary of UI types of things. So right now we're going to launch the application. Now if I log on, I should see Joe. And when I come back in, I get MVC app, hello Joe, welcome back. That growls and that goes away. Now as I promised before, we'd be able to switch out various implementations without actually bringing in, deleting, adding any kind of assets. So let's do that right now. Stop debugging, and we'll go to our references, and we'll remove block UI, and then we're going to add a reference, growl. Now, if we do the same thing, fingers crossed, we're going to see growl pop up when we do the logon. So right here, we're going to have Joe is going to log back in. And yep, sure enough, hello Joe, welcome back. So right there, we have the ability to see the various growl implementations and how we can switch those out. So real quick, I want to jump back into a bit of the presentation here so that we can talk a little bit about the design and jump right back into code. I want to do a couple more steps here. And so let's see, jump back in here. So with our design, we originally, this is kind of the lighthearted part of the story. This is the part where I veered off in the wrong direction. Initially, temp data seemed like a great place to start. It has request plus 1 persistence, so if I had a redirect, I could get my growl consistency from page to page. Still need some other mechanism, and for that I was using web cache, and I've been using that ever since. As I mentioned before, there's the ability to redirect web cache. So the good part of that is that it's part of the framework, and there are a couple of places to inject functionality, the iTemp data provider and iController factory. And I thought to myself, if I can share it here, it's the sky's the limit. And what really turned out was it wasn't quite as glamorous, and not for the sake of temp data, but for the sake of how I was using it. So temp data is an interesting animal when you really look at it. Its life cycle is during the course of controller.execute. It's alive during action and view calls and not during your constructors. So what's happening in the life cycle, I borrowed this from Stephen Sanderson's blog. This is an older picture, so there may be differences from where MVC2 is at, but I think this gives a great picture in terms of when we're processing the request, we make a call. A call is made to create controller and get an instance back, and that's what where it's being delegated to our IOC container. We get that handed back, and in the process, it's handed a temp data provider. We can provide an alternate temp data provider, but temp data isn't actually loaded until we're into controller.execute, and so it's not all that straightforward, not all that friendly for an injection scenario, because you've got to be you've got to case everything that you say about when and where you can use it. So it is destructive, and that's the beauty of temp data. It's request plus 1 is very useful, but when you try to restretch it, it's useful for those cases where you're doing things in the browser and you've got good control of it. If you want to do something more as a toolkit, it isn't always what you think. Pretty soon request plus 1 becomes request minus 3. So just a note there in terms of why we did it. So moving beyond temp data, perhaps it's best to just leave temp data as it is. But it can be done, and it's done in one of the older revisions, so kind of interesting for what it's worth, probably nothing more than that. So to move on to what we're doing is we're using session to live through the request direct scenario, and if we look at the life cycle of a typical request, we've got the pipeline that instantiates the controller and the view model, wrapped up a lot in terms of the MVC pipeline here, oversimplifying things, but I think it gets the point through. We do an action invoke view model. We interact with the view model, passes a status back, and something is done, typically a result declaration, and then we render the view. And at that point, everything's good. We've got the data, and we're living within our request context. Now, when we spawn request contexts, that's where it gets interesting. So we instantiate these, the controller and the view model, we invoke it, we do a view model iteration, interaction, it comes back with a status, and it's telling the controller, oh, you need to do a redirect at this point. And at that point, we lose our information. So what happens is we come back in, we do our view, and we've got this broken up. The reason these are green is because when we think of MVC, of growl for MVC, what we're really looking at is at the end of these paths, we are doing a render. So we're effectively saying, we're done with that session variable. So the nice thing is we have an endpoint in both cases for when we can get things out of session. Now, on the other hand, the real data that we're storing is not in session. The data for the actual growls is stored in web cache, so we're keeping the stuff in session pretty light. So in web cache, it holds the actual growls for a period of time. It's 2 minutes by default. You can actually change that. The thought there is that we don't need these for a very long period of time once we declare them into the web cache. When it is called, the web cache erases the entry on the AJAX callback, and the normal web cache mechanism terminates after a default time. So let's jump into the next coding session. That's to add a little different scenario here. So let's say that I want to have more than one growl, and this supports that. But I might have other growls that are going on here and running. And so as we jump into that, I want to take just a second to take a look at the growl for MVC. When we look at the growl controller, what we're seeing is that there are two actions on this. There's index, which is actually going to render the growl, and then there's the JSON result that's actually going to be called back. And you'll notice that the output cache is being declared here as not storing. So what happens is we grab, as part of grabbing the messages out of the growl renderer, it also clears out web cache. That way, if we have an arrow back to the page, we don't get the growl messages. So we don't want to have a situation where somebody gets a message, they navigate away from the page, hit back arrow, and they see the same message saying, you just deleted an account or something. It'd be quite confusing. So this is really where we are lining all of this behavior up. Let's see. So let's say that we wanted to, just as I said before, I want to add another message. And what I'd really like to do is to say, in my account controller on logon, it would be great if the underlying object model gave me the ability to say, and this is typical with most membership implementations, what we're going to do is to say, I'd love to be able to say, if membership service dot days to password expire is greater than 15, greater than 14, actually less than 15. There we go. That would make more sense. Then I want to growl a message back to the user that's going to say, add a message, and I'm going to give it a new growl message. And I'm going to say MVC app for my title, and I'm going to say you have, and we would, if we had that variable, we could say we have n number of days. We'll just say you have 14 days to reset your password. So that's great. If we had that, then we'd be able to display that. So we'll just simulate that here, run the app, and we'll see that we actually get multiple growls at this point. So once we've got the log on, I now have two growls sitting here. Hello, Joe, welcome back, and you have 14 days to reset your password. And then they close out. So what would be nice is that second message we seem to maybe want to have that as being something that's sticky, so Joe actually has to interact with it and shut it down. Or we could even post a link on that thing that says you have 14 days to reset your password, or just click here to go ahead and do that. So kind of a convenience factor. So let's look at how to do that, and that's really actually pretty quick. It works really nice because the JSON result is, or the producing JSON is actually reflecting over the data types, and since it's doing that, makes that really quite nice. So let's just add a let's see, let's just add a quick class here, and we're going to call it sticky growl. And sticky growl is going to derive from the growl message implementation. We've got that. I'm going to implement the interface. We've got that, and we're actually just going to set this to get set. Here we go. We're going to add one more variable here to this instance, and we're going to call it equal sticky get set. So that's the extent of what we have to do there. Now we're going to jump into the growl implementation for MVC, and we're just going to make a little change here. We now have, this is just dependent on the growl implementation, of course, and what they've specified, what he has specified for it is, I'm going to say sticky colon data of key dot sticky equal true. So if that comes back true, we will if sticky is set to true, we'll set that. Now the last thing, let's change our growl. So we're going to end up taking a hard reference to that implementation of growl at this point, but we're going to say, hey, that's okay because we like the way it's doing it at this point. So let's drop into our account controller. We're going to add this message. We're going to make this a sticky message, and sticky growl, sorry. There we go. Add the reference. So now we just have to say our title is equal to that. And our message equal to that, and then we're going to say that our sticky is equal to true. And then we're set. So now, lo and behold, if everything comes together, we have got our feature here for when I log on. Joe, as you recall, is just going to come up and say that he has 14 days. Okay, so you have 14 days to reset your password. It resets back, and that one stays behind. So now we can have Joe interact with this, or Joe can simply shut it down and ignore it, like most of us do. So that is, so that's the wire up for that. And really how you can pull it in, how you can play around with it, how you can change it. It's just like dealing with some existing MVC apps. So that's that piece. Let me jump back into the presentation here, and we'll drive a bit further in it. So again, the content is built into the assemblies using portable areas in MVC. The areas are registering early on. The plugins are aware of the component conventions, and we have conventions in place with the application, or with the plugin component toolkit that allows you to just wire into this and change it as you need to. The one thing that you'll notice with all of these individual files is that if we were to look at the properties, all of these are marked as all of these things are marked as an embedded resource. So, and we see that also with the views as well. And where that is coming together, I won't belabor this too much because Jeffrey Palermo had a really good presentation to C4MVC a little while back, and he did a great job of just running through it. So I think that really calls it out. But just to real quickly explain how this is working for the purposes of this conversation, we have context.map route. This is actually setting up into our embedded resource handler with the MVC contrib portable areas and saying, when you come in and you look for this route, actually divert to another handler that's going to serve up this content. So that's where that bit of magic is going on. So so we have the other place to look at is growl config. If we look at this implementation, what we're going to see here is that there's a cache time in minutes. Debated on doing this simply with an interface, but an interface with one property isn't very interesting. So and leave it to injection, but just went with it that way. Let's see. So one other thing to show with the application is just to prove the point here that the way things are being rendered down to the browser, that we're pretty efficient from the standpoint of working with this. If we look at the page source, you can see that we had put our header for our CSS and our JavaScript up here under the head tag, and then had created a div that was containing our point for growling. So if we jump back here and log on, I'll just show you what those divs look like when they're filled in and what the path is looking like. So we now have these things working here. Close them. I'm going to say view page source. Now I can see that I have in the case of jgrowl, I have two JS files, one that is jgrowl for MVC specific, one is the generic jgrowl implementation, and then there's also the jquery.jgrowl CSS that's being deployed with our little area. And then down here we have the actual growl, and there we're seeing a path back into the application. And you'll notice that we're actually rendering a path back. So the JavaScript, the jQuery is actually picking up this path, firing it back to the server and saying, give me back my JSON content that we discussed before. Shut it down out of debug mode. And when we look at one of those handlers, when we saw that from before, it's actually calling in, grabbing the URL string out of that div, pulling it back, making the call back to that URL with the get, saying give me the content out of there, and then iterating on the list of items that are in there. So that is effectively that. Now, the last piece I have to go into, I'm just checking to see if there are any messages. Q&A. Let me drop into here. Let's see. I see that the growl for MVC project on Codeplex isn't published yet. Can you please restate the plan for that? Yes. So what I'm doing right now, the code is out there, the initial documentation is out there, and the last piece of that is to get the licenses in place. And so I'm going to do this this afternoon. Just get it out, get it in place, so I can publish it. I want to make sure that I'm referencing those. Okay. That was Jay Kinter. I hope that answers your question. So we'll be coming online just a little bit later today, and I'll publish a set of DLLs that you can import and pull them into your project. And also in the source code history, like I mentioned, you'll see a branch for the MVC contrib stuff, or the MVC conf stuff, then that will be in that as well. There's another question, is there a way to push content instead of pull? I'm not sure. Do you mean that you want to push this growl information directly to the web client instead of pulling from it? I'm guessing that might be the question, and I'm not sure how the best way to go about that is, there'd be ways that could work within a inside firewalls, but fairly difficult instead of, okay, he said yes. You could set up a polling mechanism for this to go back and say, give me an ID, polling back every 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, just using a JavaScript timer. And that would probably be a bit more friendly to firewalls and things like that. Does that, I hadn't thought of that. That would be an interesting way to pull that and activate that within the framework. Okay, thanks. I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to go to the last piece. We've got 15 minutes here. And what I'm going to do is talking a little bit about refactoring. We've been doing things kind of fast and furious, fast and dirty here, really, around the logon and the account controller. I want to break this out into a view model. Now, to save you the pain of actually sitting here and watching me do this, I'm going to pull this out of, let's see, I'm going to pull this right out of Mercurial, and I'm just going to say update. Okay, so now when I drop it back here, I should have the application that's going to reload, rethinking. Here we go. It looks like we're back. Okay, so within the application, what I'm doing is separating out my my view models. So if I go to the models, I now have a logon model. And if we start here, let's see, actually, a good point probably to back up and to compare and contrast for just a second that logon model. Let's see, jump here, go back to this point, and I'm there. So I just want to take a look at that account controller one more time. So, and point out some of the key points that we want to watch for. I think Jimmy Bogart's doing a great job with how to keep these lightweight, and this really speaks to that. What we're looking at for logon is that this thing is aware of membership service, form service, and growl recorder. Arguably, it shouldn't be aware of any of those three. That it should just be working with a view model that comes in, and we act on it. The view model, since it would know what's going on, it should be coordinating all of these activities, and so we'll just make that change here real quick. So back to history, we'll set the Mercurial time machine forward, back to here, and now we've got our account controller, our home controller, and we have the logon model built out. So what I've done here, now I can just review what's going on here as opposed to having you watch me code all of this. So on the logon model, I now have iMembership service and iForms authentication, which were already broken out, and iGrowl recorder. This is all coming in on the logon model, and it's setting these up. So from a DI standpoint, IOC is going to just provide these to us when we ask for them, which makes that great. Let's see. Then there's a logon method called, that's a Boolean, and it goes back and it says, okay, I'm based on what comes out here, I'm going to return a true or a false, and I'm also going to add the growling. So all of my UI concerns are now happening inside of here instead. And now I can test this really easily because I now have the ability, I can pass in mocks, I can set the expectations and make sure that everything's going. I can set the forms authentication to respond wherever I want to. And when I look at it, in order to get this level of IOC injection within a view model and get this to inject when we are posting back to the page, what we have to have are a couple pieces in place. And those, if we just take a look at global ASAX, you can see a couple of things that we did differently. Let's see. Maybe not. It looks like this didn't model. Oh, no, here we go. Here it is. Okay. So at this point, I was nervous there for a second, thought I lost my changes. So at this point, everything is the same up to here that we had done before. Now what we're doing is we're registering types. We're registering that logon model responds to iLogon model, forms authentication service responds to iForms authentication service, and so on. And then the last bit is to say, okay, to the model binder, whenever you see an iLogon model, I want you to be an IOC model binder looking for an iLogon model. And this is where we're making sure that the dependency injection works. Similar to the model that we used on derived type model binders, just a different way of thinking of this. Derived type model binder actually allowed for variation on the implementations as you're actually going after, and having it sniff out what they actually are based on some metadata. So let's see. Once we've got this in place, the other place to take a look is the model binders. The IOC model binder is sitting here. This is an AutoFac implementation, really married to AutoFac in how it's wiring up to the HTTP context. You'll notice that back on the, and this is pretty typical that we see in .NET, that we actually extend it some way. Some of them change what they're deriving from. AutoFac says, I'm just going to define another interface on here and make sure it provides that. And that's what it's going after, to say, give me the contextual information as I'm running so that I can resolve within the context of the request. So that is really set up. Now, if we just jump back to our controller, how does that change? So where we would really make a difference is if we completely got rid of all of the models here and did the same thing to it, because if we look at logon, guessing I passed it, yeah, blue right by it, there we go. If I look on logon, I'm now looking for an iLogon model, and as we mentioned with the binding, the model binder is going to say, when I see this, go look for a logon model implementation. And then with model state, I'm handling the normal stuff that is controller related. Am I valid? And then it says, okay, if I logged on, let's do the normal redirects that we were doing, which is very controller type things to do. And then if I don't log on, I've exited out of here, I'm going to add a model error like I was doing before. Now you could say these should be in other places based on validation or other things. Kind of depends on how you want to slice and dice that. But then finally it'll fall through and just go back to the regular model if there was an error. So where it makes this nice, if you think about this, this is now fully encased in the model. There's nothing that this is referring to outside of that. So we could, if we went through and refactored this thing, get rid of all of these implementations and just drop them off of the account controller, and obviously get rid of this as well. So that's a nice way to proceed there, and a nice target. And lo and behold, there's absolutely no difference in the application changes. A little bit of work, but at the end of the day, you come up with something that's immensely more testable, or easier to test, and easier to maintain, as in my opinion anyway. So I'm getting that back, exact same behavior as before when I log on. I'm getting those messages. Those are coming out of the model instead of the controller now. So that's that. I guess any, just jumping back to wrap up, the idea that we really want to put those controllers on a diet. I like the title of Jimmy's presentation, and what he was talking about is really key. And inject into the view model, wire it up through IOC. It's a great way to handle the responsibilities and really honor a single responsibility within our objects. So in conclusion, we demonstrated how to wire up your project for growl, how to make project-specific modifications, and how to separate your UI concerns from your controller through using DI. Finally, the code, right after this, I'm going to dig into those, make sure we've got everything set, and I'll launch the project here this afternoon to kind of keep with the spirit of MVC Conf. And so one more time here, let me show, I want to mention, please fill out the speaker feedback form for the session. That would be great to hear back. And again, here's my contact information. This is also being put up on the site in source control. I guess all of the presentations are being put up there. This is great. So we can review them. But here's my contact information, steve.aber@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter, feel free to ping me with any questions or if you have any thoughts. I like that idea of having a mode where it pings back using jQuery every n number of some kind of a configurable setting. Seems like it could be would be a really nice use for that. So if that's feel free if you guys have any other thoughts on that. Enjoy to take a look at them and put something together. Let's see. Curious on your opinion. This was a question. Would you say that it is better, worse, or indifferent to instead use growl directly in your views? The place I could see where you'd want to use them in your views is in response to some user action on the view as opposed to some server-side action. Because I think if you were, I guess there certainly is the case for if you're doing some client-side activity and you want to have growls pop for it, you would definitely want to use something that was client-side, but then you'd probably be getting your messages from a different source. The other thing that you wouldn't run into in a problem with client-side growls is that the one thing that you have to watch out for with client-side growls is that if they are popping on essentially document ready, what's going to happen is if they navigate away from the page and navigate back, getting them to go away and not come back in error is pretty difficult and gets a little crazy. So that's part of what this solves. Now, if you're responding to user clicks or user activity in the client, I think that's a different case. And I think that's each case has its own particular need wherever it fits. Does that help? I find most of my responses being based on AJAX calls. Yeah, I think in those cases, absolutely, with an AJAX call, that would be the case. This would be more for the case, like I mentioned before, with sort of a hub application where you've got functions that are going out and you just want to growl to the user, hey, something happened or something you want to be aware of to pop that up and be right there. But I would say be interesting to say how do we get the URL such that we could deliver that to your JavaScript. So instead of having to include all of the CSS, JS down your page along with the picture assets and things like that, you could be referencing these separate areas really, as long as we gave you a URL that you could resolve to. That you could say, I want a growl implementation, just hand it to me and let me run with it. So that would be another functionality, perhaps. I hope that answers that. Any other? So I just want to say thank you. Really a pleasure privilege to speak here. Exciting to be doing this today. It's great that the community is coming together as well. MVC.
This presentation was recorded at MVCConf. For more content like this, go to www.mvcconf.com.